Gentlemen, let me recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington, to inquire.
Chairman, thank you, and witnesses, thanks for your testimony and your insights and knowledge, and it's very concerning for all of us where we find ourselves in this affordability crisis that is driven by a record inflation for all Americans that's taking away now $500 on average every month for working Americans. I mean, there are probably 5 out of 10 Americans that don't have $500 a month in savings. And so we're on the front end. I hope we can turn it around, but I don't see the policies that will actually stop this inflation and recession and get us back on our feet and provide some relief to our fellow Americans. Unfortunately, the nation is relearning 2 very important lessons: the law of supply and demand and the law of unintended consequences. When supply is constrained and is significantly outstripped by artificially, I would suggest, overstimulated demand, and the gap between the two continue to grow, you get what we've gotten, which is the largest in recent history regressive tax on working families. The largest regressive tax in the form of inflation for working families. And this is no exception in the housing sector. We've seen the interest rates now as a lever to try to get some control over inflation, forcing mortgage rates now up by 2 points year over year. If you own a house that cost you $300,000, you're paying on average $400 a month more in your mortgage every month. It's just unsustainable for most working people in this great country. I would suggest that the supply and demand gap was self-inflicted in most of the case, okay? I'll never say every and all, but I think when you look at the labor shortages, you've got people that were given generous social welfare without work requirements and were paid more to stay home than to go back to work. Well, they had a rational decision. Make as much or more staying home or go back to work. And we have a massive labor shortage situation in the country. Overregulation, especially with the fuel supply. 80% of what turns the wheels in the United States economy is oil and gas, fossil fuels. There is a whole of government assault on that industry, and we wonder why we are paying an all-time high cost for fuel at the pump. These things are constraining supply. Meanwhile, as the Federal Reserve of San Francisco appropriately suggested, flooding the market with federal monies just overstimulated and created this demand-side crisis because of federal policies. Well-intended. I don't think any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted the consequences, but we have reaped the whirlwind from those policies sown in the past. And here's the thing. They're continuing to push policies similar to what I described, namely the largest tax and spend bill we've seen in recent history. So, Mr. Pinto, you talked about 70 years of government subsidies and interventionist policies in the housing sector for the objective of having more affordable housing stock for low-income folks. And you said not only did we miss that mark by a country mile, we actually achieved the highest levels of foreclosures in our country in the developed world. So tell me what the effects of, the unintended consequences of more taxes, more regulations. The Green Book of the President, his tax proposal is $4 trillion. The skinny Build Back Better is $1 trillion in taxes. What will those taxes, more regulations on oil and gas, and more spending and dollars from our federal government going into the market do to this already tenuous, at best, situation in the housing market?
Thank you for that question. I think the answer is it will cause consumer inflation to go up, and we've talked about that. On the house price side, it may actually result in a recession. A lot of people think we may be heading towards one, but I think in the housing area, we likely will have a soft landing nationally in terms of not having absolute house price declines. But if you start doing things that lead to unemployment and lead to a stronger recession, that could then actually start impacting home prices and have them decline over time, which is something we certainly wouldn't want to see.
Thank you,
Mr.
gentlemen.
Chairman.